Activate your energy.
Welcome to the Activated Authors Podcast, a show where we distill the core principles of what it takes to become a happy, healthy, and productive author, no matter what stage of the journey you're at. I'm your host, Daniel Willcocks. I'm an international best-selling author, as well as an author coach, speaker, and creative entrepreneur. But most importantly, I'm a lifelong student of all things productivity, psychology, and human behaviour. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. Without further ado, let's dive in. What is up, Activators, and welcome back to another episode of the Activated Authors Podcast with myself, Daniel Motherflipping Willcocks, and here with me every week is...
It's Sam Frost, me. Hello.
Hello, Sam. How's your week been?
It's been all right. It's currently half term, so there's been
yes.
Yeah, there's been lots and lots of miles. He's been playing a new game that he's very much enjoying, and been showing my sister it. So yeah, no, it's been good. It's been nice to not have to get up to get him to school. How about you?
What game is it?
Bendy's Dark Revival.
Interesting. I haven't heard of that one.
It's the sequel to Bendy and the Ink Machine.
Seen some of that one.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Nice. I don't know, man. My week has been busy. It's my little one's half term next week. I've got him then, so I'm trying to front load a bunch of the work to make sure that I can have some free time to try and do some fun things and do the dad stuff. Eagle-eyed listeners. What's a good one instead of eagle-eyed? What's a good one?
Bat-eared listeners.
Bat-eared listeners will have noticed there wasn't an episode last week. How to say this? I had a thing that I had to do the week before, and it took all of my energy out of me. So that is why that didn't happen. And
Dan had a little short circuit and needed time for his circuit boards to be resoldered.
Yes, yeah. I'm trying to think of like how much to say, because it's been a big couple of weeks for Dan, and I'm still on the tail out of it. I can't say that.
Dan's had a lot of personal stuff that has taken him to some places that he wishes he didn't have to go, but had to go, because if he hadn't gone, then the personal situation would have gotten a lot worse. It has now been I'm reticent to use the word resolved because of everything, but it's not a case of Dan's trying to be like someone that is teasing things or anything like that. It is just, unfortunately, there are some things in our personal lives that we cannot talk about, whether that is because we want to or because it would be, in fact, probably in breach of something or other to do so. Needless to say, if you've got kind of brains between your ears, you can probably figure out roughly what it is. Dan has been at no point in any criminal issues. He remains
for this.
Yeah. He remains the cherub-faced boy child that he's always been. But yes, it's been a lot, and as much as I'm sure you wish to scream what has been going on, unfortunately, it would be tantamount to shooting yourself in the foot, head, and nose at the same time.
Wow, that about covered it. So yeah, I've been trying to just get back into rhythm. Like, as you say, there's been some kind of resolution, which means that now I can actually, for the first time in God knows how long, actually do a bit of future planning and sort some stuff. The only issue is I don't know what to future plan right now. So I'm trying to figure that stuff out. But moving into, because this is a nice sort of segue into something that I've enjoyed. I finally had this come through after like nearly a year and a half, 2 years of waiting. So for people not on YouTube, I'm holding up a FreeWrite Alpha, which is like a distraction-free writer's keyboard. And I'd seen a lot of like the FreeWrite stuff over the last few years. They've got like a typewriter type thing. They've got like a Traveler, all these different models. And this is like the latest one that they've got. And like in short, just to describe it, it's essentially a keyboard with an e-ink screen, a bit like a Kindle. And the idea is that
there's a calculator with a keyboard attached.
A calculator. And the idea is you take it with you, it's lightweight, you turn it on, you type, you can only see the last few lines of your work, and you don't get distracted by Facebook and all the other stuff. And so it's a nice little toy / gadget that I've been waiting a long time to play with. And it finally came. I think it was meant to come like August 2022, potentially, if I remember my dates right. It can't have been. It must have been a long time I've been waiting for this, and it's finally come through, and it is very, very pretty. It's got, I don't know if the microphone will pick it up. Nice clicky clack sound, which is quite cool. And I'm yet to draft on it because I'm currently trying to work out what I'm writing next, but I'm looking forward just to having a bit of a play with it. And it's got a light on it. Having to play with it and just using it to draft some words distraction free. So yeah, I know that if you watch on the YouTube, Sam's face says it all. She doesn't understand why, but each their own. And I'm happy to give it a go and play with it. And I will report on how it goes. Yeah, I'll report on how it goes, typing and having all that fun. What's something you've enjoyed this week?
I have enjoyed sitting on my bed and looking at my bookshelves because I've moved my room around.
Nice.
There you go. That's what I've enjoyed. We don't need to delve any deeper into that. Oh, I'll tell you something though. My laptop just told me that it's running low and I don't have it plugged in.
Oh, dun dun dun.
Not very clever of me, is it? Dan, fill the space. I'm just going to mute myself while I find my charger. Fat-eared listeners amongst you would have realised that there was a sharp edit there because Dan failed miserably in his mission. Okay, moving on.
Word of the week.
Yes, it was your word.
Yeah, oligopoly. So oligopoly meaning not a single opoly, not a monopoly or a duopoly or a triopoly, but an oligopoly being a market that has multiple different leads. For example, the phone market. For example, you could argue supermarkets. And yeah, did you manage to sneak the little bludger into a conversation?
Yes. Although I don't remember now. So I'm going to say I failed because it's just easier than me trying to remember.
You did it.
Yeah, I know. I have no memory of anything from about 5 minutes ago.
But you did say last week that you did it. So I'm going to take that as you did it.
Okay.
Even without a story. I snuck it into a conversation with my father.
Hold on a second before you just start, because you've just gone into that like you normally do this. For the first time since this segment began, Dan has actually not only done it, but remembered that he had to.
Yeah. Yep. I snuck it into a conversation with my father and he did not pick up on it. So that one worked out very, very well. I tried it on you a few times. I know that's against the rules, but I still tried it.
I try it on me all the time, even though I've said it's against the rules.
It's just fun. I tried it on Becca, even though she was on the podcast when we set the word. And so, yeah, I achieved oligopoly as a word for the first time. And so now that means we've got a new word for next week. So, Sam, what is this week's word of the week? So
this week, the word is gubbins, just because I like to say it. Gubbins. And I've
Gubbins.
I've got the definition here.
That's a Hobbit surname.
It says this is an object that has little or no value and is also referring to a gadget or device. So like when you can't think of the name of something, pass me the gubbins over there. Yeah. It can also refer to odds and ends or rubbish, and oddly enough can be used to describe a silly person. So basically, much like you not being able to remember the name of any gadget, so the word gubbins is a catch-all. It seems like gubbins is a catch-all for any word.
So this should be, in theory, easy to fit into a sentence.
Yeah.
Can you think of any? Can you think of any gubbins off the top of your head? Like useless things that have no value. Like I've got one very, very particular in this household.
Oh right. I mean, I've got a person. I shan't name them.
Yeah. So
I've got a drawer full of gubbins. I know that.
Well, my mother owns a spoon rest, which I would consider a gubbin because it's a little tiny, it's a bigger spoon that's flatter that you rest a spoon on top of, so you don't get drips on things. Yeah.
What's that catalogue? Betterware. Betterware is essentially a catalogue full of gubbins.
Yeah. There's also like a wine pourer, which is like a handle that you wrap around the neck of a bottle to pour.
I've got one.
Yeah, a hand, like straight to mouth, get rid of the cup, done.
Like, yeah, like I can't even see it being helpful for like someone that maybe like has arthritis or that maybe is an amputee, because you still need to hold it. And a lot of the time, so my mum has arthritis and needs like certain different devices. So she has things that she puts on taps that makes it easier so she doesn't have to grip and,
Yeah.
but often for her, it's a case of she needs something that she can properly grip around. So the bottle actually would be more like,
Ergonomic.
yeah, than so yeah, that's definitely a Gubbins.
Yeah, gubbins.
Bloody Gubbins.
How do you spell that?
Gubbins.
So literally just
Right.
gubbins.
I mean, I know most people listen, but we do get some people watching, and I apologize because I don't know what is going on with this bit of hair, but it's driving me insane. I've just got a bit of hair that's like keeps like doing this, and
We'll
I'm
call it
extremely
Natalie.
vain.
Natalie's playing up again.
Yeah,
It's been around
Gubbins,
gubbins.
Gubbins over
It's a
here.
very northern word.
It's
I
a
feel.
very English word,
Yeah.
and yeah, Gubbins doesn't sound as good as Gubbins.
Gubbins. Gubbins. Gubbins.
Gubbins.
Okay then, so into our win from the community for this week. So this is a fun one. So J.A. Mortimer we're going to go for this week because
what a good surname.
I know, they published book 4 of their series. And the book is a sci-fi book, so if people want to check it out, like the cover's beautiful. It's called Fuel Stop 6 and it's part of the Uncharted series and it's book 4. So if you want to check that out, go to jamortimer.com or jump into our bloody community and say hi to J.A. yourself.
Yeah, activatedauthors.com/join. Don't be a Gubbins, jump on in.
Don't be a Gubbins, show some lovin's.
McGubbins.
What is it in Superbad? It's McLovin, isn't it? It's
McLovin. That's why I said McGubbins. Yeah, I was doing. Yep. Thanks for explaining it.
Okay, so we don't have a question this week because we have a guest. And
well, I have a question, which is how the hell did we get this guest?
Oh, mate, don't even. So bat-eared viewers among you will have noticed that me and Sam are both wearing merchandise for the person we're going to be interviewing.
Yeah.
And that person is the insanely talented Frank Turner. Now, the question on people's lips might be, what is a bloody musician doing on a podcast for writers? Well, I've got a number of reasons. Sam, what are they?
Well, first of all, right, you want to talk about being a writer, then you need to talk to someone that writes. And Mr. Frank Turner is prolific in his songwriting. Now, again, you might be like, yeah, but songwriting isn't the same as writing a book. All right. But I think the point that you're missing is that most of Frank's songs are kind of folk stories, autobiographical. And actually, what it takes to write a song is a very similar skill set to what it takes to write things like flash fiction, short stories. It's about taking the moment that you want to explore and getting rid of kind of anything else around it and still making it completely compelling and have it a beginning, middle and end and all the rest of it. And when I say prolific, I mean he's just it's not released yet. It's in March, I believe, his 10th studio album. Is it May?
May.
I've got the M's mixed up. Oh, what a Gubbins.
But yeah.
10th. Yeah, he is incredible and a lovely human.
Wonderful human. And yeah, like there's a lot in there. So we speak about the breadth of creativity, about, mental health, telling the truth with your writing. And as Sam says, there's a lot of stories in his work, and he talks a lot about the economy of writing a story within the music itself. And whether that is a novel, whether that's a short story, I think there's a universality to the mentality of sitting down, creating the thing, speaking your truth. And he's just a fiercely independent person. So pretty much most of his success, he's been with labels and stuff, but he pushes and he hustles, and he's on the cusp of celebrating his 3,000th live show in 10 years. 10 years? Yeah, 10 years, which is absolutely insane. And just to share a story that I didn't have the chance to share on the podcast with Frank because his time was understandably quite limited. I will say for people who haven't listened to his music, it's well worth checking out some of his songs, because he has a full range of like the heavier sort of rock stuff. He's got very like sweet acousticy stuff. He's got like quite melancholy, folksy stuff, kind of like you said. But I was introduced to Frank in 2012, I think it was, and I heard one of his songs. He had a song called "I Still Believe," which he ended up performing in the sort of beginning entry part of the London 2012 Olympics, and I had only heard that song. My friends were going nuts for him, and he came to Lincoln to do a show at the Engine Shed, which is like the big music venue there. And I'd been working all day doing parkour coaching, and I was knackered, and I'd been in the sun, and I turned up to this gig at like 7 p.m. just still in my clothes from work. Went into the venue, and the opener for Frank was this older American guy called Tim Barry, who's very like grizzly guitarist. You kind of like literally think of him like with a knapsack and a guitar on his back, that kind of musician. And he was wonderful. He was awesome. And then Frank came out, and fuck me, can Frank do a show? Like I've seen Frank live 2-3 times now, and yeah, man can put on a show. And I was just so exhausted that I couldn't dance. I just stood there and watched like a zombie, and just got hit with this wave of song after song, and like loved everyone. And I literally had my friend come up to me being like, are you not enjoying this? And I'm just standing staring, like exhausted, going, this is the best gig of my life. And that was my experience of my first Frank gig. And he's one of those people that I feel like he's got a song for every one of your friends.
Oh yeah.
I feel like I could go to one of my friends and go, you should listen to this and try that, and they'll love it, and love this person. But yeah, not only is he a wonderful human being, not only is he a fiercely independent, creative, prolific artist, it's Frank.
Yeah.
Frank. And I think that really shines through in this interview. Yeah. So, I mean, we've kind of hyped him up a lot. So hopefully this kicks ass. But without further ado, we'll kick you over to our wonderful interview with the delightfully talented, insanely prolific Frank Turner. Enjoy. A former member of punk rock band Million Dead, Frank Turner turned his attention to folkier acoustic music after the demise of his hardcore outfit. Since that time, he has transformed himself into a successful, internationally charting, award-winning singer and songwriter of consequential folk, punk, pop rebel songs. Frank boasts over 2,800 live shows since 2004 and is keeping the spirit of creative independence and rebellion alive with the upcoming release of his 10th album, Undefeated, set to hit stores on May 3rd of this year. Welcome to the podcast, Frank.
What a lovely introduction that was. Thank you very much. That's kind.
Well, it's easy because it's all stuff that you've done. But I just kind of want to set the context of this conversation, because for some people in our audience, well, our audience are primarily writers, and some of the people listening might be like, well, how does music connect to writing? How does this all kind of link together? And obviously a lot of what I want to kind of talk about is, this independence, is creativity, it's art, which I think is universal among whatever medium you do. I will preface as well, you have also written a story in a book that you produced with my buddy Tim Leben. 10
wow. Look at you. Well done. That's some deep research right there.
I am more than prepared. Right. But I kind of wanted to just jump in and say, your music, one of the things that attracted me to bring you on the podcast, and one of the things that I have absolutely loved about your music since I started listening, in it must have been about 2011, 2012, is story plays a fundamental part in a lot of your songs, whether that's reviving old historical facts like Sister Rosetta, and you've got things like English Curse, Ginny Bingham's Ghost, all that kind of stuff, and then more personal stories like Wave Across the Bay and Miranda. Talk to us a little bit about how you see story in the sense of fitting into quite a short medium to tell a tale.
What a question. I think that sort of narrative as a songwriting device is a cool thing and an interesting thing, and it's something that I've always enjoyed as a listener. I remember, I say always, like in my solo career, I should say, quite a sort of crucial moment for me in the process of moving from being in a kind of willfully complicated and oblique post-hardcore band, whatever, however you want to describe Million Dead, into doing what I do now was I had my friend Jay, who still makes music under the name Beans on Toast, but we'd recently met, and he was he managed a bar in North London called Nambuka, and they'd have lock-ins, and at the lock-ins Jay would get a guitar out and play these little songs that he wrote about us and things that we got up to, and that was hugely eye-opening for me, because I was busy trying to write sort of complex extended metaphors about Polish reform communism or something like that. I mean, I wish I was joking. And then suddenly I remember there was a weekend when one of our number took so much acid that he thought that there were Chinese soldiers hiding around his room who were hunting him. And the following weekend, Jay had a song called Steve and the Secret Chinese Army. But the immediacy of that and the narrative to it was so striking to me. And it sort of broke. I was sort of getting lost in the weeds, I think, as a writer, I guess is my point. And like, you know, very shortly after that, I wrote my first quote unquote solo song, which is a song called The Real Damage, which is a story song about a weekend I had where I went out and I lost a day, but thanks to my friend Paul pumping me full of every available chemical in the known universe. You know, and fun and games. I mean, obviously, you know, I think you can do more. There's not much of a kind of like message to that song, we say. And you can use narrative arcs. You don't have to, and I have songs that don't, but like I think it's a powerful thing. Like I told you I talk too much. The thing about songs and what I do, and specifically, I think is a really interesting kind of. It's interesting to look at the history and the kind of mechanics of the art form of the traditionally 3.5 minute long song. There is a strong argument historically to be made that the song was developed by essentially fast food restaurants in the 1940s who'd done research on how long it takes to eat a hamburger, and the fact that if a song ends around the time that you finish your meal, you tend to then leave, freeing up space at the counter. So the fast food restaurants then petitioned the recording companies to manufacture shellac in 3.5 minute long 45s. So that was the kind of constraint on what became popular music. There's some debate about the kind of exact sequence of events to this, but there is a lot of veracity to this. So people say that 3.5 minutes is sort of dictated by commercial constraints and all the rest of it. But what I find interesting is that in the world of streaming, at which point the physical constraints across music full stop have been removed, with the obvious exception of some kind of bits of kind of prog and ambient and that kind of thing, a lot of people stick with the 3.5 minute format. Is that just learned behavior? Maybe, but I also think there's something inherently satisfying about that to the human ear, or to the, let's say, the modern westernized ear, however you want to put it. You know, and I think that a story that's told within that period of time is an interesting thing, you know, and it's like, it is a challenge to fit a narrative into that. But I guess from a writer's point of view, it's the equivalent of writing short stories versus writing a novel. I think most writers will know that will know way better than me that there is a you know, there is a set of skills that is required for writing a short story that is in some ways distinct from writing an extended piece like a novel.
Yeah, for sure. We've just we're currently going through an anthology of flash fiction,
right?
And yeah, just that idea of fitting something that is compelling and complete, even if it is incomplete in its larger sense.
Sure.
It's a very tricky thing, and something you do.
It's a different skill set.
Yeah.
And the flip side for me is that, like, I'm well storied and well practiced in writing 3.5 minute long narrative pieces, whatever they might be. I think that I find the idea of writing a novel, let's say, sort of basically terrifying.
Yes.
The idea of kind of sustaining a narrative device, a narrative arc over that amount of sort of time, number of words, pages, is something that, like, it sits in the corner of my mind, scaring the shit out of me, I'll be honest with you.
Intriguing.
So, smoking a cigar in the corner, just looking at you like, hey.
Yeah, just giving me evils. Do you know what I mean? and the thing is, like, you know, ultimately, like, I guess the musical, there isn't really a musical equivalent other than, like, the concept album. And, there are one or two concept albums, like, as in narrative concept albums, rather than, I mean, I released a record called No Man's Land, which is sort of a history record, but they're vignettes. They're not kind of linked by an overarching arc. You know, there are narrative records that I love. Separation Sunday by the Hold Steady is probably the best example of that. Or indeed Seventh Son of a Seventh Son by Iron Maiden, which is a rad album. And but, you know, concept albums broadly writ have a kind of bad press, shall we say? And there's reason for that, in the sense that there are some really bad ones, or overblown, bombastic ones, shall we say? Anyway, so yeah. So I mean, I might have my eye in on writing the short story, the musical short story. The novel is not my thing as yet.
Something that I find particularly compelling and interesting about your music is, I mean, we just said like you're set to release your 10th album, which congratulations, and that's insane. Also, the cover art is gorgeous. I have listened to music of yours from kind of across your career, and something that I find that stays with it is truth. Like, it always feels true. And I struggle a lot with different mental illnesses and my mental health in general. And it's very refreshing to hear that, like, reflected in music. And I was just wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about, number one, how you deal with being creative when it is so difficult, when, you know, you're having anxiety or any kind of mental health problems. And then once you're kind of through that, like, how you use that to like move forward and create.
Yeah, I mean, good questions. I mean, I think that, like, ultimately, in a lot of ways, music is and has always to some extent been part of my kind of coping mechanism, I would say, creativity. So it's, in a funny way, I wouldn't really frame it as saying that, like, periods of depression or anxiety, which are things that I interact with in my way, and I've had we'll come to that later. It's not so much that they interfere with my creativity; they kind of prompt it in a funny way. Do you know what I mean? Or at least, you know, it's obviously not as simple as, like, I feel bad, then I play guitar and I feel better. And indeed, one of the breakthrough moments of my kind of 30s was realizing that whilst music is a necessary condition of my sort of mental health toolkit, it is not always a sufficient condition for being well, let's say.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I guess what I'm trying to say is that there are mental health professionals and they know what they're doing. And there are times when you want to talk to them. But you know, yeah, sort of, I mean, I guess another way of saying it is that, like, I since I started, quote unquote, writing songs when I was very young, when I was like sort of 11, 12 years old, they were garbled nonsense for a long time. But the sort of the creative act of, like, you know, I'd learn a Nirvana song and then I'd, like, swap some of the chords around and write some of my own stupid 12-year-old lyrics over the top. But there was a sort of a sense of, like, in a way that, looking back, I'm quite sort of, like, impressed by. There was sort of a sense that, like, creativity was not out of bounds. Do you know what I mean? It was like, I could also do this. And of course I couldn't to the level of any musicians that I cared about, but, like, there is that fundamental first thing that any creative person has to do, which is to allow themselves to create, you know. And some people don't have that, and I did from when I was very young, and I'm very grateful and slightly surprised by that. Not surprised, but just kind of like, I can't really explain it. Do you know what I mean? There's no backstory to that for me. It was just, I was like, yep, this is fine. And I'm like, what a precocious 12-year-old child you were.
You feel like so much older at the time as well, don't you? In those moments, you're like, yes, this is so mature. And then looking back, you're like,
oh yeah,
who was I?
And I wrote an entire record about getting old when I was 25. But many of the songs of which I still sing live, and there are bits where I'm like, Jesus Christ, dude. Anyway, so, you know, making sense of the world, there's been lots of kind of moments of difficulty and pain and all the rest of it that I make sense of through music. The one bit of sort of mental health related stuff that was interfered with that in some way is that I had quite a fair few broadly writ addiction issues, should we say. And I completely and emphatically reject the idea that drugs assist creativity. Is fucking horseshit. Or at least certainly the drugs that I was into. I mean, I've never really been into smoking weed. It's not really my thing. Some people say that it helps them be creative, and that's legit, but, like, uppers do not help you be more creative. It's bullshit. They'll keep you awake, but yeah, it's not good. There's not good news that comes out of that kind of mindset. let's say, and getting through that did produce songs, you know, whether you're talking about Untainted Love or Get Better or various songs like that, but they weren't helpful to immediately to their writing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny, you mentioned truth earlier, and like I have always tried to be a truthful writer in what I do, and part of that is because I grew up listening to a lot of confessional music, you know. I'm trying to avoid using the word emo generally because it's so
Yeah.
well, it's been complicated as to what precisely people mean by that. To me, emo means a very specific set of bands from kind of the late 80s, early 90s. It doesn't have anything really to do with My Chemical Romance. I like My Chemical Romance. They're friends of mine, but and I'm not sure they think of themselves as an emo band. I'm talking more about kind of early Sunday Real Estate and Rites of Spring and stuff like that. But anyway, it was quite sort of visceral. And, you know, when I fell in love a long time ago with that moment of that creative act where somebody says something that's kind of unretractable, you know, I remember hearing Philophobia by Arab Strap for the first time and just kind of staring at my stereo and saying, did he just fucking say that? Like over and over again. I don't know if you're familiar with that record, but it's one of the most brutally raw, self-excoriating records. You know, I got drunk and told you I was thinking about taking a test and you laughed and said I'd fuck anything in a skirt once I'm wrecked. You know, it's uncomfortable to listen to, and I love it. And you know, that's a taste thing, and not all music is like that. That's not true of the lyrics of the Scissor Sisters, and good for them.
They do like dancing though.
They do, I met the singer from the Scissor Sisters once, and he was a delightful human being. Very
that's nice to know.
It's always helpful.
Anyway, so you know, so I've always been a fan of that kind of moment of kind of bone showing through flesh. I've tried to do that in my own music. I think it's important to say that, like, I had a moment in my later career as a songwriter, sort of in my 30s, of kind of understanding, you know, the classic example for me is Springsteen. Springsteen writes fiction in his songs a lot of the time. I remember, this is a sidebar, but I remember years ago, my friend Derek from the band Fake Problems made me laugh for about 3 straight hours. We were listening to the album Nebraska in a tour van, and he put it on, and the song starts, "My name is Joe Robertson," and Derek went, "No, it isn't." Anyways, but you know, he uses fiction to tell emotional truths, and that was the thing that it took me a long time to kind of really understand was like allowable in songwriting, as it were. And it's still not something that I do very much or find very easy. I have done a few songs in that vein. I have a song called Balthazar Impresario, which is a kind of character song, and whilst they are historical characters, I did a fair amount of character inhabiting for the album No Man's Land. But like broadly writ, I write autobiographically and in a confessional style, and that is useful to me. And that was a very long answer to a short question.
I love it. I told you it's a perfect podcast guest. So obviously covering truth, I think it's fair to say that you've lived a very different life to what is considered the norm. There's a lot of, you know, emphasis on independence. You know, you're on the road a lot, you travel with all these different people. It's a very different life to what people are kind of comfortable with and used to. And obviously people listening to this podcast, they're potential novelists, short story writers, they love that artistic life and kind of living away from the norm. But one thing that I find very, very strong is that there's always this law to come back. There's always this law from society to go, come back to the 9 to 5. This is comfortable. This is where happiness lay. And then you get people trapped in that system for 20, 30 years, and then they find their freedom on later in life. Could you just speak a little on your thoughts on that, on what it's been like to kind of live that very independent artistic life?
Sure. I mean, I think that the first thing that's important to say is that I'm now old enough to understand that it is not my place to tell anybody else how to live their life. I mean, this is all personal reflection, and like, there's something slightly, and I mean, was entirely guilty of this at certain points in my life. There's something a bit gross about kind of like precocious kind of 23-year-olds being like, everyone should like tell the system to fuck off, and there are people who can't or don't want to do that because they have other life situations. I'm now old enough to understand. Anyway, all my throat clearing out of the way. I mean, like, you know, I got sent off to a boarding school when I was very young, when I was 8 years old, which is something I'm increasingly mystified by as I get older. But it kind of like disrupted any sense of kind of belonging to my upbringing at a really early age, which was not what my parents' intention, but they fucked up, because essentially I was like, well, screw those guys, nothing to do with them. And then I discovered punk rock, and I started just bunking school and jumping the train to London, and just sort of was a pretty independent character by the time I was in my mid-teens. In ways that kind of like at the time I thought was pretty cool, and I went through quite a long time of feeling like proud of this and all the rest of it. There's a fair amount of hurt in that story, which it's taken me a long time to kind of admit to, should we say. Anyway, and then, you know, and then touring, being a touring musician sort of became my goal, because I read a book called Get in the Van by Henry Rollins. And then I wanted to tour, and I started touring when I was 16, and then I toured until last week. I don't know. I've done a lot of time. I mean, you know, it's been fun. That's what am I talking about? I'm sort of summing up my life in one sentence. It's been fun. You know, it has its challenges. I think that I try again, as in my old age, to sort of be wary of the bravado of like, some people can hack it, man, and some can't. And I think that's a little trite in places. I do think that putting yourself in kind of unusual and uncomfortable positions is an interesting thing to do, particularly when you're kind of young enough to handle that with ease. You know, I think that life is short, and I think that human experience is broad. And I think that it would be a shame if you have the opportunity to do otherwise. It would be a shame to spend your life just doing one thing. Having said that, I mean, I ultimately have spent my life doing one thing, which is being a musician. So who the fuck am I to talk about this? I always there was a wonderful quote. Legend has it, and how apocryphal this story is, I don't know, but legend has it that Steve Earle, when he was a teenager, sort of went and found Townes Van Zandt, the great songwriter, the great Texas songwriter, and said to him, how do I be a songwriter? How do I write songs like yours? And Townes said to him, you need to arrange your life in such a way that you could pack up and leave in half an hour. And you need to live your life in such a way that you need to do that from time to time. That's the great quote. And I referenced that in a song of mine, I Am Disappeared.
My favorite song, incidentally, of yours. Just throw that out there.
Yeah, well, that is sort of a roundabout Townes Van Zandt quote, and I have Townes' initials tattooed on my wrist. Anyway, but so I don't think these are all kind of wonderful things. I mean, first of all, life is long, and I think doing different things at different point in your life is completely fine, and there's a time and a place for different approaches. You know, at this point in my life, I'm a bit more settled than I have been since I was 8. I'm 42, so I live in a house now, and I have a cat. Still tour a fair amount, but I'm a bit more rooted now than I have been for a long time, and I'm very happy about that. And it gives me different perspectives, and it has affected my writing in ways that I'm quite happy about. Do you know what I mean? Ultimately, in a roundabout way, I think what I'm trying to say is that, like, just changing shit up is important for writing. Or it is in my experience, let's say that. Do you know what I mean? If you live one type of life forever, then you'll probably run out of things to say about it at a certain point. Switch it up. That's what
I like that. Sorry, that's just hit me a little bit. Yeah, I like that.
But, I mean, ultimately, like, you know, Ian Curtis wrote some of the most powerful songs ever written, and lived a very, very different life to mine. And he wrote about being essentially sort of trapped in a working class industrial existence, which is something I don't have experience of, and his songs are more successful than mine, so happy days.
I just want to take you back a little bit, because you're saying that, you know, you are feeling now like you're in a more settled place and you're very happy, and that's lovely to hear. You still have, obviously, the punk. It's still very much like part of who you are, and it comes through in your music fantastically. I had a moment last night where I was just like, the world is burning, the world is fucking burning, and like no one is doing anything. I don't know, and I felt completely helpless and hopeless, and I was just like, I don't know how I'm supposed to move on from this moment. And much like you, I turn to creativity when I'm feeling that kind of way. Often for me, it's just, you know, like a painting that I'll just do and it's done, and that was its entire purpose. But like, you managed to like really put resistance and anger into music in a way that is not only kind of uplifting and makes people feel defiant in a good way. But it's also compelling and helpful. And I guess just using this slightly as my own therapy session, how does one take that feeling and turn it into something like that? Because it blows my mind.
That's very kind of you to say. I mean, I don't have a short answer to that. I mean, it's like
that's fine.
And I would also say that like I'm not sure that I necessarily find it easy. You know, like there is something about the way that being an artist, being a recording artist works, that you sort of present these finished items and people go, how did you do that? And it's like, by fucking spending so much of my life screaming at a piece of paper. I can't even tell you, you know. So, you know, it's not necessarily that it just falls out of my head. I do feel like there was a moment in time when when you become an established musician or successful musician or touring musician, whatever you want to say, like you kind of start understanding that if you're going to write a song and it becomes a successful song, then you're going to have to sing it a lot. And that's fine. But it made me sort of think about the utility of songs to a degree, because like on some levels, I mean, ultimately, if I feel a certain way, I'll write a song about it. But like a song that just kind of goes, everything's fucked. Boo. Is like, I don't want to sing that every single day for another 3 years. You know what I mean? I would say everything's fucked. Why don't we do something about it or whatever? I think it's important to say that I completely know where you're coming from and feel the same about like the world seems very fucked. I feel like we're in a position that is historically unusual in many ways, in the sense that like really the kind of northern or western or whatever word we're using sort of project feels like it's on a downswing at the moment in a way it hasn't for a long time. For good or ill, and for good, you know, for whatever reasons we can discuss, but I think that's historically interesting to me. And I don't, but I'm not quite a state of the world songwriter. Do you know what I mean? Like it's more personal than that for me, and and my reasons for that is because I haven't found the way. It's not even that I haven't found the way to talk about what I feel about it, it's that I haven't found out what I feel about it. Do you know what I mean? I'm still confused, and like I don't know what to do about Ukraine or climate change. or sort of like infrastructure collapse. And I mean, I'm not sure that infrastructure collapse is a particularly sort of interesting subject for songwriting anyway. Maybe it is. I don't know. Somebody can prove me wrong. But you know, I don't quite. I try. I don't love the phrase "stay in your lane," because I think that in so many ways creativity is about fucking lanes off and doing whatever you want. But like, at the same time, like I try not to speak out of turn about things that, not to speak with false authority, I suppose is what I'm trying to say. And like I can give you songs about depression, drug addiction, imposter syndrome, and touring, and what you know, all these other things, and pen friends, and whatever else is on the new record. But I'm reticent to try and hold forth about what it is I think that we collectively should do about X. But I mean, you know, I try and, I mean, I'm fortunate, I feel, in my influences. I mean, everybody feels like that, otherwise you wouldn't be influenced by them. But like, I was lucky when I was a kid to come across Black Flag when I did. There's a directness and a kind of defiance and an urgency to Black Flag, which has always sort of haunted my songwriting to a degree. A friend of mine said to me the other day, "Is like, Jesus Christ, man, 10 albums of trying to drive a Black Flag truck into the Counting Crows crowd, and you're still doing it." I was like, "Yeah, cool. I'll go with that." Yeah, that should be on my CV, really, shouldn't it? Yeah, but you know, there was a kind of directness and a kind of no fucking aroundness to Black Flag that still informs my writing. I do think, you know, I think that this is true of many people. You can take the person out of punk rock, but you can't take the punk rock out of the person kind of vibe. And like there was a if nothing else, punk rock from a purely kind of creative technical point of view teaches you that brevity is the soul of wit. Get the fuck on, say what you need to say. Don't fuck around. And as much as I adore Springsteen, I've always thought that you can tell that Springsteen's kind of creative moment of germination predates punk rock, because like, Jesus Christ, man, no one needs to see anyone play for 4 hours. You know what I mean? And like, you know, he was influenced by it for a minute on Nebraska, because Nebraska is an extremely concise record, and I fucking love it as a result. But you know, like Jealous Again by Black Flag's 48 seconds long, and it's like it says everything that song needs to say. So every time I write a song that passes the 48 second mark, I'm like, oh, I'm dawdling.
Yeah.
You know, so a little bit of concision it's a kind of, I mean, I suppose the writing equivalent would be, it's a slightly Hemingway-esque thing. Do you know what I mean? It's just like sort of being brief and concise.
Yeah, and gives a bit of a context, I think, to your song Eulogy. But I will have to draw attention. We are getting pretty much on time, and I obviously want to be respectful of your time. Just two more things before we wrap up. I'm going to just be personally indulgent for a second, if that's okay. There's obviously a reason we brought you on the podcast. Like, I've been a massive Frank Turner fan since 2012, when my friends first thankfully introduced me to music. I know Sam has absolutely loved your stuff since I introduced her to it. And before we kind of get into the final question, I just want to say a personal thank you, because your music, particularly in the last 6 months, is some of the hardest of my life.
Yeah,
and that's unequivocal. And your music has really been a just base in keeping me moving forward, and just the power behind your words and your stories. Like, I just want to say thank you from myself and Sam, because we really, really appreciate all that you do.
That's very kind of you to say. Thank you.
And kind of on that, you know, you're bringing more music to us. So why should people download Undefeated, and what are you most excited about what this record is going to bring to what you do?
You know, I think it's a good record. I mean, I know that's sort of a non-answer, but it's kind of some records I have kind of like slightly more grandiose kind of conceptual sort of frameworks that I'm sort of plugging them into. I think that was definitely true of like No Man's Land's the obvious one, but even like Take Back Heart and Positive Songs, and you know, Be More Kind had a sort of conceptual structure to it. There is structure to this. I mean, there was a moment in time when it was a concept record about having an argument with my 15-year-old self, and it's not that anymore, but it's certainly that haunts the record, shall we say, that kind of idea. There's a fair amount of discourse on nostalgia as being a fun thing to indulge, but also kind of ultimately deleterious for your mental health. That is a theme that runs through the record as well.
Yeah.
But I just think it's a good set of songs. I just think it's cool. I really like it. Do you know what I mean?
That's
like one of the things for me, like we finished making the record, we recorded it at my house, I produced it myself, and my wife said, "It sounds like you guys are having fun," which hasn't necessarily been true for a few records.
Yeah.
And you know, we're blessed with Callum on drums. It's our first time recording with him, our new drummer, and he's just a fucking dream. And yeah, I just think it's a bunch of cool songs about stuff.
The ultimate pitch.
I mean, there's there we go. There's some, you know, there are some more serious songs on there. There's some more fun songs on there. I hope people enjoy it. I'm really, really fucking proud of it.
And where can people find out where to get the record and more about yourself?
Well, if you type my name into a website called google.com, you can find many things. I've got a website, I've got Twitter, I've got Facebook, I've got Instagram, I've got fucking TikTok, god damn it. There are information should in theory be easy enough to come by, but with the new record is out on the 3rd of May, the singles are coming out as we speak. There's a good 10 million tour dates coming. We've announced, as of the moment I'm speaking, we've released the American dates. I've then immediately received complaints that the American tour did not feature shows in either Austria or Swindon. I don't know what to do with that question. We're going to be playing everywhere. So hopefully I will see anyone listening, and indeed both of you, at a show in the not too distant future.
100%. And Sam, is there anything else you want to add just before we wrap up?
Just very quickly, thank you, because I just echo what Dan said. Like, I've had a lot of medical problems this year, and get better, recovery. Those kind of songs have like seriously kept me going. So just genuinely from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
That's very kind of you to say, and I hope that you're doing okay. I hope that you're on an upslope.
Not dead yet.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Frank, for jumping on the show. We really appreciate your time.
All the best.
There we go. That was the interview with Frank Turner. I know I enjoyed it.
I had that thing where, like, the entire time my brain was going, it's fucking Frank Turner.
Mm-hmm.
It's fucking Frank Turner. And like, I had my questions written down, but I was so anxious and nervous because it's fucking Frank Turner that I did the thing that I didn't want to do, which is the reason why I wrote the questions down, which was like, here's a question, let me ask you it in 5 minutes or less.
I think we're all good. Gone.
I was just gonna say he was incredibly like generous with his answers. And like, again, if you know his music, then you understand kind of the storytelling, the truth behind what he does, and that really shone through, I thought, in just who he was as a person, just a normal, really decent guy.
He's a delightful guest just because he's a talker, as he kind of said on the show itself. But as you know, we said before, there's so much in there about creativity, lighting that passion. I think if you're someone who is interested in Frank and you want to check out his music and you haven't, obviously brand new album coming out soon, check that out. I know I will be. But you can literally go back to sort of his earlier work and you can see the journey and the evolution of a person chronicled in his music. And I think that's one of the things I love, is that every time an album comes out, there's a new piece of his history that you unlock.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating. And he's someone that's just very open-minded. And I think one of the things that I appreciated the most, which has kind of shone through in the interview and sort of in the last show that I saw him as well, is that he doesn't give the straight answer. He doesn't give the prescriptive, this is like, as he says, not everyone should be creatively independent, because that doesn't suit everyone. Some people need that, and the world balances on that yin, that yang. And I think, it takes a certain level of maturity and experience living the life that he lives to come to that conclusion and to be able to share that. So yeah, I mean, I feel like there's 1,000 different lessons that can be taken away from this interview. So, whatever you've grabbed, welcome to the world of Frank Turner. Obviously we're not zealots. Dun, 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 dun. But no, we're both very, very big fans. And I was very, very excited to get the email from his agent to say that he was going to come on the show and have that talk. So it came at a very good time. As we kind of touched on at the end of that interview, like, it's been a hell of a year for both of us. You guys, if you've listened to this podcast regularly, will know some of that, and obviously have been on some of that journey. And Frank has been instrumental in just helping us ride that wave. So one more time, if he does listen to this again, thank you, Frank.
Yes, thank you, Frank.
Hashtag Frank.
And in fact, the hoodie that I'm wearing, which has Not Dead Yet on it, which is from the song Get Better, was kind of my anthem throughout last year. And there was, I'm trying to remember exactly how it happened. Was I like falling asleep and you started to play the song? And then I just started singing it at the top of my voice. Yeah. Needless to say, like Dan said, like, he has been the soundtrack really for last year, just because of how prolific he is and how many different songs he has for different moods, different situations. The guy has lived, and he's lived on the page as well, which is very refreshing. And again, there's so many lessons to be taken from his answers, but also from his music. And I think it's really important as creatives that we do not pigeonhole ourselves.
Yes.
Like, even, if, say, for example, you are a dancer, or you are a writer, or you are an artist, as in you paint, and that's your entire world and that's all you want to do, keeping yourself in that lane when it comes to inspiration and it comes to looking for people who have kind of blazed their own path is folly, because there is so much inspiration in the world in general that if we just kind of keep our head down and just look at, say, authors that inspire us, or we just, even things like, you just look at your own genre. Like, yes, obviously there's arguments to be made for doing that when it comes to research and all that kind of stuff, to try and figure out, how you want to market your book and all the rest of it. But I'm not talking about the business side here. I'm talking about like the heart. And I really do think like it behooves everybody to just take your head out of the sand when it comes to the world and where you take inspiration from, because all that happens when you just keep looking at the same things is that you kind of repeat the same thing. And it's what is it? It's diminishing returns.
Yeah, for different words, but yeah, you got the right one.
Yeah. So all this to say that, you know, it makes sense to look outside of what you are doing and what other people that are doing very similar things to you are doing, just for inspiration and fresh air, really.
Yeah, and just kind of to, you know, punctuate that point, the book that I held up at the beginning of that interview is called 10 Words Tragedies. And the concept behind it is literally a single line of one of Frank Turner's song that captured the heart of Tim Leben and Christopher Golden, who then created an entire anthology where they spoke to Frank, got his blessing, got a bunch of the resources that inspired that song, and then distributed them to writers to create an anthology. So like, there's no limit to kind of where creativity can start and where it can stop.
And Mr. Turner wrote a story for that book as well, didn't he?
Frank Turner wrote a story for that. He did, yeah.
Yeah, he did.
His first ever written piece of fiction that was in the back of that. Not a novel.
No.
Not a novel.
The novel's still sat in the corner giving him evils.
But yeah, I can't really say it better than that. So that is Frank Turner. Check out his music. Check out his latest album.
Check out his tattoos. I mean, come on, guys.
Oh, amazing tattoos.
Incredible tattoos. Yeah.
It's not fair.
So many.
Yeah. But yeah, that brings us to the end of this episode. So we hope that you enjoyed that. And there's nothing left to say really from us other than a massive thank you to you, the listeners, for tuning in. We appreciate you and the time you choose to spend with us each and every week. And as always, if you're looking to level up your writing and activate your author career, head on over to
activatedauthors.com/join
to find out all about our community, our resources, and everything else that we've got going on. One more time from myself and from Sam. We will see you next week.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Activate your energy.